too, we could move over there onto those rocks that are in partial shade. We still have a good view from there.
I think we can stay up here, but y'all can move that way.
You can go anywhere else.
Oh, I was trying to get the computer into the shade if it's overheating.
It's going now. Just...
Okay, well I'll just kind of be over there by them then. This view is so spectacular over here. It's really something.
I think you can see down like all around the Colorado River.
Yep,
So
that.
from the viewpoint over there, you can see all the way down.
Yep.
I'm so mad.
Yep.
Somebody was in the way. They were like kind of like shoving. So
I like 2 to like 5 minutes.
You're like, no, I'm getting this shot.
I was like, I'd rather
There's only one person in front of me, but
shoving children.
But yeah, actually the view just down here is a very clear view of the river. Really, really nice.
I didn't realize there was more down there, and I thought they would step off.
Wah!
I was like, I don't want to witness a death.
Just give me a thumbs up.
Yeah. Go down there. We're going to go to the tower. I saw someone in their wedding dress.
Yeah, I saw they're doing a wedding shoot here. It happens all the time.
They were right on the edge when I
Yep.
was standing here,
Yep.
taking photos.
It's actually a very popular place to get married. This actually Overlook is a very popular place to get married. Because you can have your guests sit here. Yeah.
I didn't know you could like do that.
You're not supposed to, but you can get a permit.
he booked the tower.
I don't know. I've never looked into it, but that'd be an amazing place for a
We're gonna
reception.
make a lot of money too if they were
That little deck out there would be an amazing place for a reception.
Elena wants to go to the tower. Yes.
All right. Yeah, so just let me know when to start. My phone is complaining. Good?
Yeah, good. Good to go.
All right, so welcome in person and virtual students. Here we are at Desert View. So this is our second stop here at the Grand Canyon. And we're in a nice little stone amphitheater. And if we look off over this way, we can see another spectacular view of the Grand Canyon. What's nice about the view over here, it's a little more open. We can see all the way down to the Colorado River below. We also have a spectacular view of the Great Unconformity. So can anybody pick it out of this view? What would we be looking for if we're looking for a big unconformity? Do we know what an unconformity is? Okay. So what would we be looking for if we were trying to spot one? Or if we're doing it visually, what kind of clues would we be looking for, even if we didn't know formation names?
Rocks that look really different.
Different how? You're on the right track.
Color.
So there's some sort of abrupt change, right, in the rock units. Here, it happens to be an angular unconformity, so it's quite spectacular.
In the bag, in the camera bag.
If you can see out here, you see our very flat lying units on top, and then about midway down our view here, you can see that slope, and you see where they intersect. That's the Great Unconformity, right? So we call it that because there is more than 1 billion years of missing history out of the rocks there. So what happened? All these units were deposited, tilted, eroded, right? And then those new layers came in on top. All that stuff that got eroded off represent more than 1 billion years of geologic history that we don't have any records of anymore. Poof, gone, right? So that is one spectacular unconformity. Normally unconformities are, you've got a few million years missing, and this one is spectacular in its scale. So we have a really great view of that here. What else do you think we should point out to our virtual folks about being here at the Grand Canyon and the views that we're looking at? What else do you think they would like to know?
And if you guys wouldn't mind waiting for Alex to come to you with the mic. Thank you.
Like if you were trying to describe this to somebody who isn't here but would love to be here, what would you say?
Pretty
Oh,
grand.
Anna. Yeah, it's grand. Also, the ice cream's not bad.
Yeah, the ice cream isn't here. Whoa, the ice cream here isn't too bad. Oh, we just had a raven fly by.
Yeah.
The birds here are very big. Oh, look at him. He's chilling. He wants to listen to the geoethics
Yeah.
talk.
He heard you say the ice cream is good.
He's like, you gonna finish that?
Yeah, pretty much. But I guess it's hard to comprehend like the scale of it. But I think the best way to maybe describe it is that when things get far away, you see that like blue tint because of the atmosphere. It's like that, but like with anything you're looking across the canyon with, which is pretty scary and pretty impressive. It is very 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 big. But even the surrounding areas, I think over there, I don't know if we've captured much
Everything
of it.
okay over there? I don't want to talk about it. Okay.
I think over there, like the surrounding areas, like once you look past the Grand Canyon, it's just like a long plateau.
Yeah.
And it's really, really beautiful and
yeah,
very
you
green.
can see the Colorado Plateau, right, in all of its glory.
It's absolutely beautiful, and we'll be sure to send you guys some pictures. There's also, I think, 2 cinder cones over there.
Some guys said that they're just flat top mountains.
They are fake outs. They look like cinder cones. They are not. They're just erosional remnants.
Oh, well, call me a fool because I believe they were definitely
I
cinder
was totally
cones.
fooled the first time I was out here, so don't feel bad.
Okay.
Said there's a mini canyon behind them.
Oh, mini canyon action.
We will also drive by a pretty spectacular smaller canyon on Navajo Nation on the way back home that we can see from the road. That's pretty great. So they are on a mission. I don't know what they're up to, but they are on a mission.
Oh, there he goes. Oh, he's soaring on the little wind giraffes. Look at him go. Sorry, the birds here are really, really awesome.
Well,
too.
and the weather in the canyon is controlled by this great big cavity we have over here, right? So they're actually air currents that are unique to the canyon. So the birds absolutely take advantage, usually in the afternoon, of updrafts. They're coming up out of the canyon. So thank you for demonstrating, Mr. Raven. That was very nice.
There you go.
One of the other things I wanted to talk about here is you may have noticed that there are lots of things around here. You see John Wesley Powell's name on everything around here. Who's John Wesley Powell? Do we know? He's considered one of the sort of founding fathers of American geology. He was the head of the USGS. He's famous. Yeah, he is famous for rafting the Grand Canyon, for mapping most of it, for doing huge studies out here of the landscape in this area. But why was he out here mapping all that stuff? What were we at? What was the point? Why were we funding that expedition? Yeah.
Either it was because of the whoa, sorry, I forgot. Either I would say the expansion to the west, or for maybe mining purposes. Other than that, I have no clue.
Both are correct.
Okay.
So as the U.S. was expanding west, we needed, good maps and data about the lands out here. We also were looking for resources. We were looking for resources that we might be able to use in, building the railroads and all these other things that were coming, quickly across the west. But there was another motive to these expeditions. So there was a prevailing thought at the time that landscapes should reflect the civilizations that are living in them. The more spectacular the landscape, the more advanced the civilization should be that was there. And so part of the reason for that expedition was to map how primitive the indigenous populations were that lived in the canyon, to demonstrate that they really didn't deserve this kind of spectacular landscape. This was much more something that colonizers could really appreciate. right? So it's interesting when you look at his notebook. On the one hand, he cites that they would not have been able to pull off this expedition without the intense geological and ecological knowledge of their indigenous guides. On the other hand, he literally omits everything about all the interactions he had with indigenous peoples on his route. So much so that there's been a more recent expedition that went back and retraced his trail to see if, like, did he really go all the way down the Grand Canyon and not see any of the like thousands of people that live there? Like, did he just accidentally miss farms and orchards and, you know, aqueducts and like all this stuff? And the answer is absolutely not. There were at least, he passed more than 30 on his expedition. And he just did not put those in his notes so that it would appear more unspoiled, untamed wilderness, ripe for the taking, right? So there's definitely been a reckoning here in the last few years trying to reckon with that side of John Wesley Powell and his legacy in this area, right? Because a lot of things have his name on it, but to the indigenous people, he was absolutely no friend of theirs. After that expedition, you eventually started the Indian removal stuff, where they started coming through the canyon and forcibly removing the people that lived in the canyons. This went on all the way through the 1970s, when the very last one was forcibly removed. They had basically sort of encouraged everybody out, and you had a few that were determined to stay, and the last one was finally literally carried out in the 1970s. Here recently, there has been a lot of work with the National Park Service to try to mend those past harms to the indigenous communities. They're repatriating some of the land. They're renaming some of the landmarks to be less gross and more reflective of the communities that actually use them to live and work and have for thousands of years. So there are more than a dozen tribes that either live down in the canyon or up on the canyon rim and venture down into the canyon for resources. So it's a lot of communities. Most of those, their reservations have been moved out of the canyon. There are a few that still have lands down in the canyon. The Havasu are one of them. So they're working on sort of repatriating some of this land, giving access back to places in the park that used to be literally barred for Native Americans, and letting them back on those lands, back with those resources to build those connections again. So there's lots of things we can talk about on the indigenous history of the area. Does anybody have any questions about that? I can nerd out about this for a long time.
I do see something.
Yeah.
Just like over here, it looks like a top of like a building down there. What is that, like symbolic to something?
Oh, no, that is, so they built those all along the rim. Those are mostly those were built in the 1920s. For the Civilian Conservation Corps built a lot of those. So in the Great Depression, we were trying to find ways to employ people, and one of the ways we did that was to send them out to national parks to build infrastructure. They built all kinds of little buildings and huts and trails and all sorts of things. So, yeah. Most of the indigenous dwellings were removed from the rim. So they're all way, way, way down in the canyon. What about the watchtower? That looks indigenous-y. What do you think? No, it's absolutely not. So, funny story about the watchtower. So Desert View is famous for its stone watchtower. It was built because people thought that there should be a tourist attraction here to draw people, you know, out here. So they commissioned an artist who basically borrowed from about half a dozen local tribes' building cultures and mashed it all together into one structure and made this sort of hodgepodge homage to indigenous building practices, and that's how we get the watchtower. And people do indeed drive out here just to see it. So, you know, I guess job done. Yeah. One of the other things we could talk about out here is we can see the Colorado River flowing way down there. It's that bright strip of green down in the bottom of the canyon. So how many dams are on the Colorado River? Does anybody know it's the most dammed river in the world? 7. 7 major dams on the Colorado River. It is the most heavily controlled water body in the world. It supplies water to most of the western states. It is an area of extreme dispute. Back in the 1980s, there was almost a war between California and Nevada over water rights. They called out the National Guard on each other. There was a standoff at the state borders. It was a little wild. Even now, there are negotiations in place to try to renegotiate water rights to the Colorado River, because basically what's happened is we have over-allocated this river. We have promised more water than the Colorado can provide, especially as this part of the U.S. dries out more and more. So a serious, serious problem there. It also means that the ecology and the sediment transport in the canyon is strongly controlled by people. The dams block a lot of the natural sediment, a lot of the natural nutrients that should come through this place, through the canyon, and re-nourish the sandbars and the little side beds that have traditionally been used to grow crops. With the dams up, a lot of those nutrients don't get replaced, right? So there's been a lot of effort to try to intentionally let some of that flow out seasonally and try to get the Grand Canyon back in its closer to a natural state. So yeah. Any questions on that? Yeah. So one of the last things I wanted to talk about here is how many of you have heard about any of the mining disputes out here in the Grand Canyon? So we think of the Grand Canyon as this beautiful natural scenic landmark, but it's also got a lot of resources, including uranium, which makes it incredibly attractive to a lot of outside folks. Unfortunately, almost all of the rare earth and uranium mines out here are either on Indigenous land or border directly next to Indigenous land. So needless to say, there's been a huge amount of dispute on if those mines should ever be allowed to be open, who profits from them, who runs them, you know, all those sorts of things. And a lot of this gets further complicated going back to the Indigenous side of things, because many of the tribes here were not federally recognized as tribes. They don't have rights to dispute these kinds of things. And that was done intentionally. Tribes that lived close to potential resources were not recognized, right? So, oh, nobody lives out there, we can do what we want, right? So this gets very complicated, very, very ugly part of the active ongoing story of the Grand Canyon. If you Google this, lots of stories come up on mining rights, the Indigenous fight to keep those mines out, and lots of stuff about that. Anna.
What units? What layers?
Deeper. I mean, think about, so is uranium, where would you usually see uranium?
You
Alex?
can, this is Alex, you can find it in granites.
Yep.
I believe some granites and some sulfide deposits.
So where would we be looking in the canyon, high or low? Low, right? Way down in the basement stuff, right? You can also find uranium in some of the Triassic units as well. Just like, you know, if you go out to petrified forest and you use a Geiger counter, some of the fossils out there will ping, right? Because that pitch blende, it's a sort of a byproduct of uranium, is water soluble. And so it can kind of move through groundwater, and then it finds organic material to precipitate out on. So, you know, sometimes you can find it in younger units than it came out of, where it's kind of accumulating around like fossils. Yeah, that's a great question. Shiv.
Are these like uranium mine sites like already excavated, or is
No.
it just places where like they've detected it?
No, these are not excavated, and that hence the drama, right? Is this would have to be broken ground. These are not active mines as of now, and you know the fight is to keep them, you know, not active mines. But they're, you know, and so the argument on the other side is we need these resources, right? But do we need them from here, right? So, yeah. Any other thoughts or questions? I don't know if we're monitoring the online chat.
Not any questions from the online folks as yet, but I'll prompt them to do so.
Okay. Anything else you're curious about or want to talk about while we're here gazing at the grandest of holes? Anna.
You see a lot of land acknowledgement statements. What do you think is important in that? Like what makes a good one?
My goodness, how much time you got? Okay.
I'm just curious because there's so much research that happens right here.
That's right. So in my opinion, a good land acknowledgement is one that contains action. Yeah. Right? Like, you know, I don't belong to one of the tribes here in the canyon, but speaking as an Indigenous tribal member, what we're looking for is that you aren't just saying words to make yourself feel better, that you've actually thought about how you can make things better, right? How you can take actions to back your words up. So something that's not just like, oh, we acknowledge that Indigenous peoples love this land. It's like, okay, like, great, but like, what does that mean, right? Like, what are you going to do about that, right? I mean, acknowledging their presence is one thing, but doing something is better, right? So I like landing, throw in a line about like how that impacts what you're going to do, right? So, you know, if you say like we recognize, you know, Indigenous peoples hold on this land or something like that, follow that up with, and we believe that because of this, we are going to do these steps, right? So maybe it's asking for community buy-in before you do research out there. Maybe it's, you know, respecting permits, or maybe it's like, there's lots of little things, right, that you can say like, this is what we mean when we say we're going to respect this, right? And this is what we're going to do to back our words up.
Like, there's a lot of things that we'd like to do, but, you know, the average researcher...
That's right.
Permits and that kind of thing, that is a form of action.
Yeah, yeah. So anything you can do that shows that you're not just, you know, blowing smoke, right, is great. Nira.
When you say that there are tribes living in the Grand Canyon, are you saying like living in?
Yes.
Okay. And
way down in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know the actual name of the native name of the Grand Canyon?
Depends on which tribe you ask. Okay. So there are about a dozen of them that live down there, and they all call it something different. Okay. So.
And if they were to kind of, I don't know how to say this, kind of gain like their land, get their land back, would all this have to, like, how much land do they get from like outside the Grand Canyon?
That is what's an active negotiation right now, is what that repatriation looks like, right? Most of it's happening way down in the canyon, not up at the rim. But there's been a lot of very close work with the National Park Service over the last about 20 years to try to get some movement on, you know, actual land repatriation, you know, shifting that ownership and responsibility around.
Is there any tribes that live kind of above the Grand Canyon?
Yeah, a lot. A lot of them lived up on the rim and then used the Grand, went down to the canyon either seasonally or for specific resources, but didn't actually live down there. So, yeah, in fact, some of these tribes were so isolated, they didn't know about each other. The Hopi is sort of the classic example of that. The Hopi live like right in the middle of like Navajo Nation, and the Navajos didn't even know they were there because they were living in such an isolated, middle of nowhere kind of place. Yeah.
That's like on the map now, right?
It is. So if you look at the reservation, that's right, Anna. If you look at the reservation map, you'll see Navajo Nation, and then there's like a little hole right in the middle that says Hopi Nation, like right in the middle. And they carved that out when they realized there was another whole community living right in the middle of Navajo Nation. So, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
If there are like people living in the canyon right now and the Colorado River is controlled, do they have enough water flowing towards them for their soil to be good enough for them to make crops and be self-sustained?
It is a real challenge right now. It's a real challenge. And it's why they're fighting those dams so hard, is because with all that water controlled, their traditional places to grow things are becoming very, very difficult to sustain. So, you know, fun fact, one of the things I like to tell people is, so Navajos are famous for their peaches. And one of the places they used to grow peaches was down in the Grand Canyon along the Colorado River. They had huge orchards down in the canyon. And they thought all the peach trees had gone extinct because they were burned by the U.S. cavalry to force them out of the canyon. But it turns out they found one tree left in some very old woman's backyard and were able to repropagate it. And so they're replanting the orchards in some places, which is really cool. Yeah. Any online stuff before we wrap up? Yeah.
Can you guys comment?
Could you just come and grab that? We just showed people.
Trevor, check to see that it's unmuted.
All right. So I guess a kind of general question. I know a lot of us, especially maybe working for like, I guess governments like in total, do you have any like general or like hard rules to maybe keep in mind that might like kind of flow out about navigating geological research and stuff on disputed lands and disputed topics? I know it seems like a basic question, but I think it might be good to, I guess, discuss over.
It's actually a very complicated question, and a lot of it depends on specifically which lands you're talking about.
Okay.
Here in the U.S., abroad, there are many places where, you know, land rights and land, who has sort of, you know, I hate to say ownership because that's such a colonial word, but who speaks for that land, right? And that can be pretty complicated. Also, like Indigenous people aren't monoliths. So some tribes handle it very differently than others. Some are very open to extraction, very open to, you know, economic gain from those sort of things. Other tribes aren't. So a lot of it starts with just sort of researching that area you're going to, kind of figuring out the landscape and maybe who needs to be, you know, looped in on what you're doing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a lot of communication.
Communication, and people don't realize how long it takes to build these relationships. You cannot like call a week ahead and say, hey, you mind if I pop over and grab some rocks? Because they're going to say no. Like they have to know that like you're cool, and sometimes that can take years, and that's a challenge. Yeah, because they've been stabbed in the back a lot, right? So the natural default is to not trust science or research, because especially a lot of geologists are going out there looking for resources.
Yeah.
And so if you say you're a geologist, they double don't trust you.
Yeah.
So.
I've just like noticed even like within the general geology community, like currently, even like research scientists that like I've talked to, like a lot of them extract rocks from places they know they should not be extracting.
That's right.
Rocks. And it's very common. It's very common.
It's shockingly and disgustingly common. Yeah. Yeah. In fact, I have my Age of Dinosaurs class do a whole discussion topic on this whole issue of parachute science, of fossil smuggling, of blood amber, of like, yeah, it's a whole thing. So, which one?
Parachute science?
Yeah. Oh, I thought you said which parachute science. So parachute science is a term that is used to refer to if you go to an area far from your home, get what you want for your research, don't interact with the locals, don't involve them in any way, take what you want back home and benefit in some way from it, either professionally, monetarily, scientifically, That's parachute science. You dropped in, you got what you wanted, you left without involving any of the local communities. And so there's a big push in science to move away from that because that's kind of gross. Also, it disenfranchises those communities, right? Yeah, get it? Parachute science. Yeah. Okay, so we are at time. So we should probably wrap this up. It's getting real toasty warm out here, and it's about time for us to head back to Flagstaff. So that's all from us at Desert View and the Grand Canyon.
Shutter close.
Thanks, guys. That was great.
I sort of really like it. I had to sit down.